the time has come. We're putting the bottom end together. Welcome back to the channel. It's time to put the bottom end together, and I couldn't be more excited. I originally bought some Glico main bearings and rod bearings. I went to go put them in, check the clearance with the crankshaft, and the clearance was too tight. It was right around 1 thou. I'm shooting for like between 2 and 2.5 thou of main bearing clearance, and then same for rod bearing clearance. So I returned the Glicos and got these King bearings. So without further ado, let's get going. All right, so first thing we're going to do to this block is modify it slightly, nothing too crazy. We're going to drill a couple holes into it and tap some threads, and that is to retrofit an oil pump chain tensioner. So factory, these engines do not have a tensioner on the oil pump chain, and even a brand new chain will have a lot of slop in it. So once you're beating the crap out of these at rev limiter, which you should, that oil pump chain slaps back and forth and does bad things to the oil pump. I like to put a tensioner on the chain to help with that, so it keeps the chain taut and it won't slap back and forth. We're going to drill a couple holes to mount the tensioner. Location of those holes is graciously provided by another YouTube channel, Spank Ranch Garage. I used these measurements for my last 2 blocks and didn't have any issues. So the first measurement that we're going to go for, we're looking for 2 1/4 inches from this corner over, and then 3 3/16 down. 2 1/4. Perfect. That's our first hole. Our second hole is 2 5/8 over, and then 4 3/8 down. Now we are drilling clean through the block. Okay, we're through. Now for the other one. I'm just gonna test fit the tensioner. This is a factory OEM BMW oil pump chain tensioner from an S54. Oh, I don't have threads in there yet. Now that we have threads in there, we can test fit this. So this is where you want that other bolt to be. So now hopefully you can see when this bolt is installed, and then the other bolt, essentially this bolt being here allows the spring tension to work, and the chain is going to ride on this surface. This is going to apply spring pressure on the chain, and that's that. So now that our oil pump chain tensioner mod is essentially complete, I'm going to check the main bearing clearances. So I'm just going to clean all of the journals, some brake clean. So now I'm going to do a dry install of the main bearings. We'll do the thrust bearings first. One of these is the bottom and one of them is the top. I'm assuming, well actually I know now that the ones with the oil holes go on the bottom. So thrust bearing there, these are the ones with the oil holes. And actually before I put these in, I need to put the oil squirters in. Yep, she's a squirter. To my knowledge, these are just to spray oil at the bottom side of the piston to cool it. Might have other properties as well. that's beyond my knowledge. I did go ahead and clean all of these out, and it's a good thing I did because one of them had a chunk of, it looked like RTV stuck in it. These are essentially little check valves, little ball check valves in there, and it had a giant chunk of RTV in it, and the ball wasn't seated, so it wouldn't have sealed. Not sure if that would have been a huge issue or a non-issue, but rather play it safe. So what I had to do was I had to fish another oil squirter out of one of my spare blocks. So these are just held in by, I guess, just by oil pressure, and then obviously the bearing goes on top of them. Thrust bearing back in, nice and flush, and we can toss the rest of these in. These appear to have like an oil film on them, probably just for storage. Nice. So they're all in there, at least the top halves of the bearing. Next step, we're going to set our crankshaft in there dry, as careful as we can. Should also mention that you want the crank to be dry. I did spray it down with some WD-40 just so it wouldn't rust while it sat. Okay. Wipe this clean. You'll have the tangs on one side. Yeah, for the glycos, I could not get the thrust bearing onto the cap, and I had to use a mallet to tap it into the block, and I did not like that, so I'm glad that I ended up switching those out. Right, now to measure these. So to measure the bearing clearance, I'm using Plasti-Gauge. What it is essentially, it's a little strip of plastic, so the green thing in there. You cut a section off of that, set it onto the journal, and then when you put the caps on and torque them to spec, that squeezes that plastic, however much it squeezes. That plastic is the clearance in between the journal and the bearing, and when you take them all back off again, you can measure how much it squeezed and determine the clearance. All right, I'll give you a little close-up. So here we have the plastic you can see is on the journals, and now we install the caps, torque them to spec, loosen everything, remove the caps, and measure the plastic to see how much it squished. These are labeled 1 through 7. I'm not sure if they come labeled from the factory or if a machine shop labeled them. This block did get machined for the pistons I'm running, and so there's a possibility that they just labeled these caps. Want to make sure they're all facing the right direction. Now for the bolts, I believe the factory torque spec for these bolts is 20 Newton meters and then 50 degrees. However, I was told by a very reputable source who has built plenty of these engines in his lifetime that just do 50 foot-pounds lubed with engine oil. So that's what I'm gonna do. Well, okay. Now loosen them all. There we go. Essentially, the plastic, it's going to squeeze out this way, and however much it squeezes out, it'll tell you clearances. Nice. Right at 2 thou. Amazing. Give you a little closer look here. This first little white strip is 3 thou. The next green strip is 2 thou, and then 1.5 and 1. So you just line it up. The squish is thicker than the 3 thou. It's right on 2 thou, and it's definitely not as wide as the 1.5. So we're looking at 2 thou, 2 thou, 2.5 ish, another 2, another 2, and another 2. That's amazing news. That is awesome. I'm going to clean off the plastic gauge off of here. I've read that it's fine to leave it on for final assembly, but I also don't like chancing things, and if I can just take it off, I will. It's getting pretty late tonight, so I'm not going to get too much further. What I am going to do is pull the crank back out, lube all of the bearings, and put the crank back in and torque it down. I feel like that's going to be a pretty big win for tonight, and then I'll pick it back up in another month or so when I have more free time. This is Lucas Oil assembly lube. Oh, I forgot how sticky this is. It's like maple syrup. Just gets everywhere. Of course, I have the fan blowing right on me, so it's just blowing this all over my shirt. Just whatever. It's cool. Oh, this thing's heavy. Okay. She's in. Ooh. Ooh. Okay, don't get too excited. So messy. So we're seated back to 20 foot-pounds. Okay. Now for the 50. Let's go. Oh, she turns real nice. That is a good feeling. That's a really good feeling. Okay, I'm gonna cut it off here. This video is gonna keep going, but it's late and I'm going to bed. The Holy Grail. Probably the most exciting part of this engine build, the pistons. So I got these secondhand, although they're unused. They are specifically for this block, as in the guy I got this whole package from, the block, pistons, and the rods. He had everything dropped off at a machine shop local to him, and he had the block cut for these pistons. So comes with a spec sheet from Diamond. I'm going to just kind of put everything together, measure it, make sure everything aligns with the specs that it states, and we should be ready to party. This thing should hold as much power as I want to throw at it. Give you a closer look at these things. They are nice. Big old valve reliefs. We have our 2 compression rings, and then the oil control ring. It's a 3-piece oil control ring. close. Based on some quick math, which is the bore diameter multiplied by 6/1000ths, came up with a top ring gap of 19.6, or yeah, 19.6 thou. So I'm gonna go 20 thou for the top ring and then 22 thou for the second ring. For the oil rings, I'm not gonna gap those because you don't need to. I'm not gonna show every single one. I'm gonna show one and then do the rest off camera because that would just be repetitive. Okay, we got it. Took forever, but you can see piston ring gap. Focus, there we go. So that's the gap that we're measuring. I have my 20 thou feeler gauge. Drop this thing straight down and it's snug in there, but it does go in. So that's how I know that's at 20 thou. So I'm gonna move on to the next ring. Now the second compression ring, I'm gonna gap at 22 thousandths. Slightly bigger than the first. Might not be able to see, there we go. So this one is labeled N50 as well. That just tells you that that side goes up. Nice and flat. Money. As for the oil rings, you don't gap those. The oil rings may be installed without modifying the end gap. The gap should be a minimum of 10 thousandths. I'll measure it, but I doubt that I'll have to file them. They're so thin anyways, I don't think filing them would work. I think it would just kind of bend the end, but who knows. So for installing the rings onto the pistons, you have to be pretty careful not to scratch up the side of the piston. First, I'm gonna take one of the oil control rings. Just gonna make sure it's all clean. I'm gonna add some oil to it. There's a couple ways of doing this. What I like to do, because I've only done this one time, but I'll take where the ring separates, take one side, put it into the groove where it's going, hold it with my thumb, and then just rotate the ring around. Just make sure it doesn't scratch the side of the piston when it comes down. So now you can see the ring is in the groove where it needs to be. The expander, that's what this is called. So the illustration has these ends just butting up to each other like that. You don't want them to overlap. They won't physically overlap. So they have to butt up to each other like that. Same thing, place one end into the groove above that oil scraper ring and roll the expander all the way around till it sits in the groove. So as you can see, I have the first scraper ring and then the expander ring in there, so there's one more scraper ring to go on top of that. Oil it up. It states that it doesn't matter which way these go, up or down, but it does call out to place the top scraper ring at least 90 degrees off of the other one rotationally. So I'm gonna find the gap, which is here. Just gonna move that here. So I'm just gonna do 180 off of each other. Yeah, it says at least 90 degrees. So one end here, the other end I'll do over here. Perfect. Now you can see there's scraper ring, expander, and another scraper on top of that. Now we're gonna do the middle ring, or the second ring. Again, I'm gonna lube it up. I'm gonna install this one with the gap 90 degrees off of the oil ring. Super careful not to scratch the side of the piston, and also not to stretch the ring too far. You don't want to stretch it out. Here's the second compression ring installed. You can see N50 on there on the top. Now the first compression ring, so 180 degrees out from each other. There you can see the top ring is installed into the groove. So obviously the piston rings don't stick out when it's in the engine because the cylinder bores compress them in, but that is one piston with all the rings installed. I'm gonna cut the camera here, aka my phone, and I'm gonna do the rest of the pistons. Let's see, that probably took me an hour going slow. This is my second time doing this, so I just want to make sure I go slow and take everything, make sure everything's right. So I'm gonna do pistons 2 through 6, get those caught up with this one, and we'll get back to you. Now that we're done getting the rings onto the pistons, I'm gonna move on to checking rod bearing clearance. These rods were used. I bought them used. They seem in good shape. I did drop them off to a local machine shop who checked them out. They ended up putting new small end bushings in because the ones that were in there didn't fit the wrist pins. These are the Trend Performance HD wrist pins. Get some engine oil on this guy. Will you be able to see the clip in there? You will. So it is seated in there. I'm not gonna lie, I just struggled for like 20 minutes getting that clip in there. I'm gonna lube up the inside of the rod. I'm gonna slip the pin in a little bit, and then I want to make sure that all my rods are going the same direction as the pistons. So let's see, the Eagle logo towards the front of the car. As long as they're all the same, I don't know how much that actually matters, as long as they're all the same. So that went in really nicely. So now that the wrist pin is installed, we have both of the clips in. You want to make sure the pin spins freely in there, which it does, so that's good. I'm going to install the bearing. With these, just make sure it's sitting flush. Easy as that. Spin the motor over. So now I'm just gonna push the piston in so it's in enough. Now I'll just clean off the rod journal. Now I can take this rod and pull it up all the way onto the crank. Now is where we take our plasti gauge. I'm going to cut off just a little piece. Get it on the journal. I already showed you this on the main bearing, so I'm not going to go super into detail on this. Take your rod cap. They have numbers on one side, so you want to match up those numbers with the numbers that are on the other half of the rod. So per ARP, we're going to put it on the threads, and we're also going to put it on, well, underneath the head of the bolt. I'm going to do 20 and then 40. It's reading right on the money at 2 thou. Okay, so push the piston down a little bit so that we can get a good amount of assembly lube on the bearing surface. Pull the piston back up, seat it on the journal. Numbers this side. $20 foot-pounds and 40. There's one done. That's a good feeling. Just for sanity, I think probably good practice to spin the motor over at least one turn after everything you do. So I just put a piston in. Ooh, that feels nice. Okay. Again, I'm not going to record all 6 of these. I'm just going to show you that one. I'm going to do the other 5 off camera and come right back to you as soon as I'm done. Back at it, new day. I don't know if I mentioned it earlier in the video, but the very first set of these piston rings that I was gapping, I ground way too much off and I ruined the top compression ring, so I had to order another set. I continued with the rest of the rings and getting the rest of the pistons in the block, and then I just saved the last one for another set of rings that I had to order. Those showed up yesterday, and today, it's Friday, I'm off work early, and I have time to work on it. So I'm going to get that piston installed. But first, I'm gonna show something that I've already done. I actually did this a long time ago when I first got this block and these pistons, but I didn't film any of it. Obviously, it was a long time ago, but I figure I'd just demonstrate and have it there for proof that it was done. But that is measuring the piston-to-wall clearance. So I have these fancy tools, actually from Jeff Bezos himself, and these are gonna help me get it done. So the spec sheet from these pistons, it specifies, let's see, install these pistons with 4 thousandths of clearance, measured 90 degrees to the pinhole, 700 thousandths down from the oil land. So 90 degrees from the pinhole, which wrist pinhole, 90 degrees there, and then 700 thousandths down from the oil ringland. So measuring, that puts it basically right in the middle of this skirt. This is a 3 to 4 inch micrometer, and as you can see here, we are exactly 3.323. So I have the dial bore gauge zeroed out with the insert that I have in it is 3.3, yeah, 3.368 inches. So come over here to the bore, slide this in, let's go at the bottom. 3.368, let's see. So 41 is the biggest number that we get. I'm gonna go like halfway up the bore. 41. I'll measure this way just to be safe. 41. Yeah, so this block is machined pretty good as far as I'm concerned. So with some basic math, we take our zeroed out measurement from what this is at resting position, and then we measure the bore, and we're getting 41 thousandths of deflection on this. We just subtract that from our first measurement, and we're getting 3.327. Come over here to our spec sheet. Bore for the block needs to be 3.327. It doesn't get closer than that. So with that, I'm just going to continue. I'm going to take this new set of rings, these Wiseco 84.5 millimeter rings, and I'm going to just gap them, put them on the piston, get the piston in the block, and then the rotating assembly will be done. Just like that, rotating assembly is complete. This is so satisfying to see. I'm freaking stoked. Everything turns over really nice. Let's go. So now the windage tray can go back on. 89 inch-pounds. Now we can install the oil pump. These are 16 foot-pounds. And these two are 89 inch-pounds. The timing chain sprocket that also drives the oil pump. This is a new nut that is drilled for some safety wire. And this is reverse thread, so lefty tighty. And this gets torqued to 18 foot-pounds. Don't judge my method of holding. So with the brand new chain, there's still quite a bit of slack, which is why it's extremely recommended to throw a tensioner on that chain. Put a good amount of Loctite on the bolt. And then when I put this other bolt in, it's going to push on this spring tensioner, and then it's going to apply pressure to the chain. These ones are getting good and tight. So now with both the bolts in, this tensioner is going to keep this chain nice and taut, so this thing can live on the limiter. And the safety wire holding the nut, vibrations can loosen this nut over time, so just want to make sure that's as good as it can get. A lot of people tack weld the nut to the sprocket. As a welder by trade, I can't trust any sort of weld when you're trying to join, you know, a metal with another metal that's been soaking in oil for probably close to 30 years now. I don't trust that. It works for some people. I'd rather use the safety wire and the chain tensioner method. I'm sitting here and I'm just now realizing I've had this fan on in the background this whole time, and I was like, I wonder if that ruined the audio. I think it did. So got the fan turned off. I'm gonna throw on the timing chain guide. That's on there with a couple smacks. And then the tensioner rail just snaps on like that, but I'm not gonna put it on until I get the chain on. So I got the chain on, I cleaned it off real good, and then I was gonna dunk it in that jug of fresh oil over there, and I dropped the whole thing in, so I had to use a magnet to pull it out. So anyways, you can see that's like dripping oil, so I just threw it right down there, whatever. I'm gonna zip tie that to the guide and then throw the other guide on. Making some solid progress here. Got the tensioner rail on, and I zip tied the chain to it. Keep that up and out of the way. I think we can put the timing cover back on. Pretty stoked how this timing cover came out. I just did it in some satin black. I got a fresh front crank seal pressed in there. I got some fresh L-ring timing cover gaskets. Make sure the gasket's all lined up. And then all these bolts are going to be torqued to 89 inch-pounds. Man, I gotta say that looks pretty good. Pretty happy with that. So I'm gonna end the video out there. I feel like that's a good stopping point. I just got the head back from the machine shop today. Gonna go ahead and start assembling that. I don't think I'm gonna film that. There's nothing special going on. Mostly stock with some, well, yeah, it's stock. I have S52 cams for it, and everything else is stock. So nothing exciting there. I'm gonna get the rest of this motor put back together, and I'm not sure what I'm gonna film next, but as always, thanks for watching. Really appreciate it. See you in the next one.